Tonight on Gold Shields, we dive into the high-stakes world of Bobby Sullivan, a legendary figure whose decades-long career in law enforcement has redefined justice. From cracking some of the toughest cases to inspiring the next generation as a professor, Sullivan's influence is undeniable. But there's more to his story. He's also a best-selling author whose book, Murders Without Bodies, takes readers inside the courtroom battles of famed prosecutor Cass Castillo. Don't miss this gripping episode as we explore the riveting journey of a man who stands at the intersection of justice, academia, and the written word. Tune in to Gold Shields.
Gold Shields brings true stories from law enforcement, the military, true crime authors, and first responders. Experience the dedication, danger, and emotional toll with the heroes themselves. These gripping tales of true crimes, true stories, and true heroes are all here on Gold Shields.
Welcome back to Gold Shields. This is Dan Murphy, along with my partner in crime, Tom Smith. How you doing, buddy?
I'm great today, man. How's it going?
I'm excited about our guest today because, we have a lot of heavy shows, right? We get shows that talk about serious topic matter with crime victims and things like that, and it's important to get those stories out. But every now and then we get a chance to talk to somebody who we feel is a brother to us without even really meeting him yet. It doesn't matter. We have so much in common with this guy, but he has such an exceptional police career, not to mention a great sense of humor and a great outlook on it. And I think we're going to have a lot of fun today, Tom. What do you think?
Oh, it's going to be a blast. It's, like we say to all our guests, it's three people sitting around a bar talking. That's what today's going to be. Before we get to our special guest, a couple of house cleaning stuff that we normally and always do. A big shout out to our premier sponsor, Streamlight, streamlight.com. Check them out. Go on their website. They provide flashlights to all our law enforcement officers, military, and they do an amazing job making sure in the most dangerous situations, cops are covered and they got the tools to get them through a bad situation. So streamlight.com, check them out. They got some new and exciting stuff we're going to actually be talking about soon to get out there so everyone sees it. And our next one is Copline, copline.org. Everyone knows someone who needs someone to talk to. This is not an easy job. It's really hard. It's difficult. And Copline provides that outlet to talk to someone. It's 100% confidential. Retired and active officers are going to answer the phone and walk you through either a bad day or something that's just lingering that you need to talk to. All right, copline.org, 1-800-COPLINE, 1-800-267-5463. Give them a call. They are amazing.
Tom and I are committed. I'm sorry, Tom. We are committed to getting the word out that seeking help is a sign of strength. It is not a sign of weakness. This job that many of us have chosen for our careers takes a toll on you. It's just because you're a human being. It's more than okay to ask for help. It's a sign that you want a great life for the rest of your life after all the things you've seen and done for others. So Copline, fantastic organization. If you're out there and you're hurting, you don't have to hurt alone and you can get over it. There's a life past it, right?
Oh, absolutely. And you know what? Everyone, like I just said in the opening of it, everyone knows someone. Everyone knows someone that needs help. So just reach out to them, give them that number, and get them the help that all of us need. And like you said, there's no stigma. You need help. The bottom line is talking to someone. So again, 1-800-COP-LINE. And like always, check us out. All the audio channels you can think of and platforms on top of our YouTube channel, youtube.com/@GoldShields, Instagram @The Gold Shield Show, and on Facebook, The Gold Shield Show. Dan?
Yeah, before our guest, really quick, let's plug our own thing for a second. I'm sure he can wait in the green room. He's got his vodka. Tom and I have been having a lot of fun with our other project, which is Impact. The defense spray that's an alternative to pepper spray that is taking off. I can't tell you, Texas is on fire. We went down there, a couple of shows, a couple of demonstrations, and it's spreading like wildfire because it's a great, safer alternative to pepper spray. Now, we never used in our 50-year career, we never once used pepper spray, right, Tom?
Never. Not one time.
because it's a pain in the ass. You've got to clean it up. It takes forever. Your perp is in misery. He's in a hospital. He's making you in misery. You can only be as happy as your perp sometimes when you make an arrest. So we worked with a chemist. We came up with a formula that is safer, that you can use anywhere. How many times did somebody kick me in the back when I was driving in a radio car in New York and I wanted to turn around and belt them? But you know what? You kind of get in trouble for hitting handcuffed prisoners. You can spray them in the mouth with this, and all of a sudden you have instant compliance. So by cops for cops, www, I hate saying that, carryimpact.com, carryimpact.com. It's not just available for law enforcement and security. It's available for the private sector. My kids carry it. My wife carries it. I've got it in my car, not to replace a firearm, but to be used in the situations where deadly physical force is out of the question. And that's most situations you'll ever encounter with somebody who's trying to make your life unhappy for the moment. So carryimpact.com. Tom, who do we got this morning?
Well, we're really fortunate because a lot of times, you don't have the opportunity to talk to someone who's been in law enforcement for 3 decades and has the resume that he has in Central Florida with narcotics and undercover and gangs, homicides, counterterrorism, name it, Bobby Sullivan did it. Like all of us, like Danny and I, after 9/11, got called to JTTF in Florida and worked some amazing cases, supervising the great work going on down there. And in his spare time of doing that and retiring and being a professor, he happened to just write a best-selling book, Murders Without Bodies, which we are going to certainly talk about. But welcome to Gold Shields, Bobby Sullivan. It is a pleasure, brother.
Thank you. It's an honor to be with you guys. And I'm so pumped up about hearing about that cop line that you have. That has touched me too many times in my career.
Yep, and I think we don't even have to mention. We all know what you mean by that. We've all had that loss, right? Tom and I, when we first started this show, we talked. Let's make it true crime. Let's talk to cops and detectives and people who made great cases and survived cool things, and let's do that. But also, it has morphed into this opportunity for us to use our platform with regards to wellness for military and law enforcement. And we've had guests on who have dedicated their life to that. And we are committed to it as well. So we don't shy away from that discussion at all, because it's a discussion that needs to be had. But first and foremost, let's get to know Bobby Sullivan. For our audience that doesn't know this amazing guy, tell us about how you went into law enforcement, where you grew up, how you got to be where you are right now. Dr. Bobby Sullivan, I might say.
Well, clearly, Dan, amazing is an overstatement. I'm not amazing. I'm just a typical cop. But that got a whole lot of breaks and was blessed along the way. So I grew up to and this is something that your older listeners will understand. I grew up in a Ward and June Cleaver family. I mean, I had great parents, great support, and the one thing that my mom never wanted me to do was become a cop, because I remember I was 16 years old. We were watching Hawaii 5-0 on TV. And a little blurb came across the bottom that says Hernando County, and that's where I lived, Hernando County, which is in the northern Tampa Bay area. Hernando County deputy just gunned down at Ridge Manor. And come to find out, it was a deputy that was local, and he had come upon 2 skells in a convenience store that had just raped and murdered a 7-month pregnant woman 2 towns up. And then they came to jack that 7-Eleven store, and Lonnie Coburn went into at that point in time, they were suspicious persons. And long story short, 2 big guys, they overpowered him and they shot him with his own .357 Magnum and whole butt. At that point right there, I said, I got to be part of the right side of this thing. It bugged me. Okay. It bugged me bad that Lonnie died. But you know what? It bugs me when any cop dies or gets hurt. But when you have to put on a badge and a gun in the morning to go to work, that should be a clue that this job's kind of dangerous. But that 7-month pregnant woman who, my gosh, she begged for her life. She wrote them a check to go away, and they still executed her after they raped her. So that was kind of like the thing that got me wanting to get into law enforcement, to be part of the solution of this, and wanted nothing to do with college. Nope. I got to be a cop. I got to put bad guys in jail. So I went to the police academy. What was weird is I started the police academy back in the day I don't know how to say when this was. It's a long time ago. But let's just say if it was like back in like 1979-ish, you could be a cop at 18 in Florida. But I turned 18 1 month after the academy started, so I had to get a special waiver from the governor, who at the time was a fellow named Bob Graham, the governor of Florida, for me to start the police academy. So I started and I finished the police academy, and then man, it took a while slinging applications all over the place. A couple of places wanted to hire me and say, start out in dispatch, start out in the jail, whatever. I said, no, I want to be a cop. I got to be out on the street. So I finally found Pasco County Sheriff's Office. They have the youngest sheriff in the state of Florida, and he hired young people. So he gave me a shot. And to be honest with you, my goal was to be in and out of uniform as soon as possible. I really wasn't into the whole uniform thing. I wanted to be an investigator. I had to be an investigator. That was what I wanted to do. So I did uniform for probably a year and a half, and then I ended up in the detective division, just investigating general crimes. And I did. I was in a section of the detective division, and a lot of the older listeners will remember this. What we now call forensics, back in the day, cops did that job. It was a detective job. Sworn officers did it. I think we started civilianizing forensics like back in the late 80s, early 90s, because civilians could do that job. So I was in that unit, and I loved it. I became a certified fingerprint examiner, blood spatter analyst, the whole 9 yards. But we got a new sheriff, and the new sheriff came in and said, I'm going to civilianize this, so you got to find a new place to land. And I thought not too hard about that, because you got to stop and think, what is the coolest thing you can do in law enforcement back in the early 80s? The coolest thing. We have to think about what was the top TV show.
Miami Vice.
Miami Vice. I got to work undercover, the ultimate enticement,
Cigarette boats,
So
Lamborghinis, right? All that stuff.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. And I was kind of shocked. I didn't have a pet alligator. I didn't wear white pants with boat shoes, but we were out buying dope left and right with no backup, just hanging out in bars and trying to score bags of weed and cocaine. So I worked undercover for about 3.5 to 4 years, and then realized that, hey, you know what? I think I'm becoming an alcoholic. This is crazy. All we do is drink and hang out in bars, and the county gives us money to do that. I got to get out of this. And that's back before the Garcia decision, where they determined that they had to start paying people overtime that were in law enforcement who worked over 40 hours a week. So we were just working. And so I went to the captain, and he said, yeah, I figured you've been under the hair long enough. So where do you want to go? And so then I went back into, actually went into major crimes, and was a detective there, which investigated, the whole slew of, rapes, robberies. And I'd always had a hankering for cold cases. I used to like to try to find those old cases that sat on the shelves for a while, and try to find enough time and energy of my supervisors to allow me to look into some of those. Some of them were good. Some of them I couldn't do anything with. But long and short, they come back to me and they say, hey, do you want to go back into narcotics? We're expanding the unit, and we want to have another unit, and we need a sergeant. And I did not want to go back in. Guys, a lot of the younger cops don't realize this. Back in the day, there were very, very thin, if any, policies and procedures that governed how you work undercover. And I mentioned that it was kind of like out of control. They said, okay, come back in, figure out what the best practices are, and let's develop some policies. That would be one of your first jobs. So I went back in, and you never reinvent the wheel, right? Whenever you have to develop policy, what do? You look at Tampa PD or Clearwater Police Department, and you see what their policies are. And of course, you put the name of your agency on top of their policy, and I got policy. So did that, and we actually started doing things the right way, working undercover, and it just grew from there, guys. I took the lieutenant's exam, and I passed it, and they ultimately promoted me to lieutenant. And I was 100% sure that what was going to happen to everybody else was going to happen to me. That I was going to go back to patrol and be a shift commander. But they didn't. They kept me in narcotics, and they kept expanding and expanding and expanding and giving me. Now I had fugitive warrants. I had intelligence unit, gang suppression, aviation of all things. I don't even like to fly. I'm a white knuckle. For some reason, I'm in charge of aviation. I thought that you put regular car gas in airplanes. I didn't know. But so I learned a lot about that stuff. So they kept giving me all these different units. And next thing you know, I'm a commander. And just real quick back on the education, one of my detectives came to me and said, when I was a sergeant, said, "Hey, Sarge, you want to get a college degree?" I'm thinking, why do I want to do that? He said, I really want to. I'm going to go to junior college. You want to go with me? What do you say when your detective wants you to go to college with him? So long and short, guys, it took 14 years for me to get an associate's degree. Taking one class, and then 4 months later, take another class. And the next year, you don't take any classes. So now I'm good. I've got an associate's degree. I don't need anything else. So then they sent me to the Southern Police Institute, the University of Louisville, and spent 3 months there, and came back. And I still had brain cramps. It was tough academically, and that came with 16 credit hours towards a bachelor's degree. So I'm thinking, okay, I've got to finish this thing up. So I went to St. Leo University, which is where I currently teach. Finished up my bachelor's, and now I'm done. So long and short, 9/11 happens, and my whole focus shifts from, and prior to 9/11, we were just starting to see the influx of some serious gangs. We always had gangs in my county, but Tampa was pushing them north, and they were ending up in my county. So we started seeing a bunch of MS-13 folks. And so we were in the process of dealing with that, and then 9/11 happens, and then everything just changes. As you know, I was involved in the JTTF in Tampa. I had 3 folks assigned to it, and everything took on that turn. And I had to have my lieutenant continue on with the trying to suppress the other gangs that were heading into Pasco. And so it was a great career. After 28 years, I decided it was time to pack it in, and I retired. Thought I was going to just have a great life. So I hiked sections of the Appalachian Trail, and I went scuba diving all over the Caribbean. And after a year, I thought I was going to die. I have to have more. I have to have more of a reason at 47 years old to get up every day than figure out what I'm going to do next for fun. So I, God blessed me with an opportunity to go back to St. Leo University as the executive director of public safety, which I did, and that was a blast. I was in charge of about 22 folks, and I noticed. Now this might be a little bit of an ego thing. I noticed I was the only person at St. Leo that had the title of director, let alone executive director, that didn't have a master's degree. And nobody said anything to me about this. Like, you need to get one, but I was feeling a little less than. So I went into the criminal justice department and said, sign me up. And so I finished my master's, and now I'm totally done. Absolutely done with higher education. After 3.5 years, I got bored being the executive director of public safety. And about that time, one of the greatest people I ever worked for at St. Leo called me in and said, "Bobby, you did a great job, but you've got all this background with terrorism and criminal justice. Have you ever thought about teaching full time?" I said, "Absolutely, man, if that's what you want me to do." And she hooked me up into faculty, and I began teaching undergraduate criminal justice and counterterrorism, homeland security courses. And let me tell you guys, this was cool, because we had a course that we developed, terrorism in Israel, where we are able to take students to Israel every year to study with the IDF and the Israeli special forces. So did 9 trips to Israel with students, and the whole doctorate thing, that's just she came to me one day and she said, Bobby, you don't have I just realized you don't have a doctoral degree. And I said, no, ma'am, is that a problem? And she said, no, but I'd like you to have one. And Tom, Dan, it swirled around my head. This costs $80,000. And it's miserable. I've heard all these war stories. I don't want to do that. And then she looked at me, she said, and I'll pay for it.
Okay.
So every degree I've got, so that was 4 years of hell. And I ended up on the other side of that in 2017 with my dog. But, so every degree that I've gotten, I have not paid a penny for. The sheriff's office paid for the undergraduate and the graduate, or the bachelor's, and my university paid for my master's and the doctorate. So the long and short, that's what I'm doing now. I'm blessed to be teaching undergraduate, graduate, and doctoral students. And but what's the most fun is those trips to Israel with my counterterrorism students and hanging out with my Israeli buddies, and also the command colleges that we teach. I've taught for about the past 12 years in those, and like I said, they're right up there with the SPI and the FBI cap. So that's kind of my story. The book's a different story. Whenever you want to talk about that.
Oh, we should probably reel back, right, Tom? I mean, there's a couple of things you glossed over.
Yeah.
Really?
Here's, one of the things two things, and I know we talked about this earlier, but one thing that just came up, we've had so many great undercovers on our shows, from federal to local, and that all have that those one or two stories of, oh crap, I'm in a spot, I better get out of this. What's yours?
Oh, well, the first one, you ever had any that worked undercover in the nudist resort? Okay, here's the deal, guys.
Where do you put
Pasco
your
County,
recorder?
Florida, in the Tampa Bay area, has the highest per capita number of nudists of any other county in the United States. We have nine nudist resorts. So this will show you, going back in the day, Dan, I posed as a maintenance guy. Wearing socks, shoes, and a hat, and that's it. And at the end of a 2.5 month investigation, I seized 5.5 pounds. Are you ready for this? Something you never heard about anymore. Quaaludes.
Really? Wow.
5.5 kilos of Quaaludes. And then so probably the uh-oh story was my backup was behind me. I picked up this skank crack dealer who was going to buy me, who was going to hook me up with an ounce of crack. And we're driving, and I'm posing as a college student because I looked very young at the time. And we're driving. He's sitting in the passenger seat. My snitch is sitting in the back seat, and he's directing me to drive him to where we're going to go to buy this crack. And as we're talking, I notice he's sliding over, getting closer and closer to me. And he lifts the folding armrest up. I'm thinking, like, is this guy gonna put a move on me or something? I mean, is he? And the next thing you know, I stop at a stop sign, and I saw it coming, man. He came around here and he grabbed my mullet back in the day, grabbed my mullet, and he pulled my head this way, and I saw the shine of the blade. And he stuck me here, and it was a case cutter. And so I'm sitting here and I'm fighting with him to try to keep him from slitting, because I took 8 stitches here. I'm trying to keep him from slitting my throat. And of course, my Walther 380 is nicely secured and hidden under the seat, which I can't get to. And my informant takes out his stolen Smith & Wesson 38 and beats the bad guy about the head until he's rendered unconscious. So that was my oh my gosh story. And boy, you can go all kinds of places there. Informants carrying guns, just not doing the background check on who I was actually picking up. All I knew was this guy's name was Junebug. I didn't drive by his house and see if there was a car out there that I could have gotten a tag off of. I mean, he lived in a boarding house, but I could have identified this guy prior to. But come to find out, this guy had spent 18 years in prison for violent crimes. I would have probably handled that differently, but that's just young, stupid, undercover stuff where you're just full of testosterone and nothing bad's going to happen, you know? And that's what's scary. That's what I always taught my detectives. You always be paranoid. If you're not paranoid, it's time for you to find another unit to work, because that paranoia will save your life.
Yeah, that nervousness or that anxiety that you have is also hyper awareness, and you're paying attention to everything and taking everything in, and that's what you need. So you got this informant in the back seat carrying a stolen gun illegally. You got this guy trying to slit your throat, and you're driving a car. And you're probably at that moment thinking to yourself, I didn't have to do this. I didn't have to be an undercover. I didn't have to do this. But like anybody else who we've ever talked to, and even in our careers, it's even though we didn't really do undercover work, it's that drive to get the bad guy, isn't it? You get like tunnel vision, right?
In the darkest of nights, you need a light you can trust. That's why we rely on Streamlight. Whether you're investigating a scene, navigating through uncharted territory, or just need a dependable flashlight for those unexpected moments, Streamlight is your go-to source. With over 45 years of innovation, Streamlight crafts rugged, high-performance flashlights that can withstand the toughest conditions. From tactical torches for law enforcement to everyday carry lights, Streamlight has you covered. Join the Streamlight community today and see why professionals trust Streamlight for their lighting needs. Visit streamlight.com to find your perfect light. Streamlight, lighting your way through the shadows.
It is. It really is, Dan. And as a commander and as a teacher now of a lot of undercover folks, because we worked for this, I adjuncted for 12 years while I was an active cop at the Institute for Police Technology and Management, IPTM in Jacksonville, and trained thousands of drug unit commanders, and we also did an undercover academy to teach folks how to work undercover. And what I'm teaching them now, and what I was teaching them then, is you can't have that tunnel vision. You're talking about a drug dealer. A drug dealer. If he gets away, he gets away. If you don't get him today, you'll get him tomorrow. It's not like you're going after a child molester or a rapist or a murderer. I mean, if you're going to take a bullet, don't take it on a drug deal. Because you can do that anytime. Don't get me wrong. Especially with fentanyl and everything. It's a terrible, terrible thing. We need narcotics officers. We need undercovers. But we need them to be safe and to recognize those signs of the dragon. And if it's too risky, and to do risk assessments before they go undercover. If it's too risky, don't do it. You're in control. But like you said, Dan, they get that adrenaline going. And by golly, the most important thing is Hector got a kilo last week, and now he's the big guy on the street. I'm going to take off 1.5 kilos to where I'm going to be the big guy in the unit. There's a lot of egos going on, but you can't let that ego get you killed.
Oh no, that's a legit that's a legit thing. Who did what last week? We have to top that. That went on with us.
We have to top that.
I mean, that was every day. How many bodies did they get? We have to get this. Oh, that's constant. Bobby, what's the, in your different phases of your career with on the street and then teaching and instructing and all that, nowadays, what's the biggest difference in law enforcement right now between back then and now? Obviously, the perception of the public, we get that. But on the cop level and what's out there, what do you see as the biggest difference?
Just, Tom, the generations. The generations of policing. We did things, I think, for a different reason that a lot of people that are getting into the business today are doing it for. We didn't look at it as a stepping stone. Hey, it's a job that's got some good benefits. You know what? And if I find something else, I'll move on. And this is, I'm not talking about, a Mount Sinai incident where you're called by God. Thou shalt be a cop and rid the world of evil. But I think the older generation of cops got into it because they were called into that. They have a reason for being there. It bothers them to see innocent people victimized, and they want to be part of the solution to that. Versus, now we got a lot of folks that are getting into the business, and this isn't just from me; it's also from my police commanders that I teach 3 times a year. We're getting a lot of people now that don't even have quality social skills because they've been raised with electronics. They're not in shape because instead of going out and hunting and riding bikes and stuff as kids, they were sitting in front of computers. Now, granted, they're incredibly tech savvy. They do bring with them a lot of assets, but a lot of the stuff in policing, policing's ugly. It's physical. Sometimes you have to just think outside the box and make decisions that a lot of these folks don't have the background to make. This situational awareness, emotional intelligence, those things aren't really that common anymore. And I kind of came up with this theory, with all this conflict de-escalation that we have to teach cops to do, because as you know, sometimes we're our own worst enemies and we talk ourselves into a fight. Situational awareness plus emotional intelligence equals conflict de-escalation. And look at that every time, and I think you'll find that true, but I think it's just a generational thing, Tom, that it's a new generation of cop. And then you take that into account, the fact that society is still so slanted towards cops, especially since 2020 and even before that. I mean, it's not the job where you are appreciated like you once were.
Well, I think there's a lot of communities in America that do still appreciate, but I believe across the board, you're absolutely accurate when you say that. I think one of the other things that I've seen in my own personal observations, and I've been retired 20 years. Tom was out more recently, but he was very, we'll call it cloistered in a different world than the street policing world. A very important world, but nonetheless, he wasn't doing patrol function. When you look at how policing has changed, the different types of stuff, when we first came on the job, my uniform belt, my gun belt was so simple, right? The revolver, a couple of ammo pouches, radio holder, nightstick holder, cuffs, and my useless pepper spray, which we didn't use. Now, there's so much stuff on a belt, unless you're a 38 or above, you can't put it all in your belt. And they got all this stuff in the car, all the tools. So rather than tell you to work on, we had to work on interpersonal skills. We had to learn how to talk to people to get them to stop things, as opposed to having people, okay, now he's doing this, so now I use this, right? And that's what I see. Okay, use your words, but okay, here he's doing that. I think he crossed into this area. Now I can use my spray. If that doesn't work, I'll use my taser. We had to talk people out of stuff, or we had to go hands-on. So
yeah,
it was a different...
Exactly. Now it's immediate hands-on. If you don't do what I'm going to tell you, by golly, I'm going to pepper spray you, or I'm going to tase you. And you have that whole other conversation about how many times have you seen somebody bring a taser to a gunfight? Yeah, we've got the body cameras now, which adds a whole new dynamic to it as well. And it's interesting to know, a lot of listeners are probably thinking, well, yeah, everybody's wearing body cameras. No, across the board, they're not. We still have about 50% of the law enforcement agencies in the United States and some of them are large agencies that aren't employing body cam. But man, you're so right about everything being in the car. I'm not 100% sure that I'm a fan of having those mobile dispatch terminals in, because studies have shown the number of wrecks, police wrecks, have exponentially increased, because now, great, they're supposed to pull over and take a look at their terminal, take a look at their screen, but how often does that happen? Really? They're doing this while they're driving. They're looking over their screen while they're driving.
Similar to your background to a certain extent, Bobby, I was an adjunct professor for years at St. Mary's University in the public safety grad and undergrad area. When I was getting my master's degree, we did a study on distracted driving in law enforcement in the state of Minnesota. And one of the biggest things we saw was the use of the mobile digital terminal while they were driving, trying to check on the status of a call, looking at it and slamming into cars, slamming into passing people on the street, pedestrians. It is when I sat down during the research inside a squad car from 2013 or whatever it was, I didn't recognize it from what I used to go into. It has so much stuff in it. You can barely see out the back window. It's unbelievably crowded with equipment. And when you're paying attention to that, you are vulnerable. In New York, we were taught you got to be on head on swivel because cops have been assassinated sitting in their car, not paying attention to the street. And I don't, honestly, I only through God's grace does that not happen more because of the way cops have become accustomed to paying attention to the equipment far more than the street around them.
I like what you said. I'm a true believer. This is what I tell people. God loves cops. He absolutely does. Well, actually, God established cops in the book of Romans in the New Testament for a specific purpose, to protect people. But yeah, I remember, Dan, back in the day, we had a shotgun rack and a 3-channel radio. We didn't even have walkie-talkies.
You had a shotgun rack? We didn't have a
shotgun rack. Yep.
We didn't have speed loaders.
Speed loaders. Oh,
we
that
did,
brings.
well,
I love
when
my
Dan
speed.
started. When Dan started, and my group was maybe the second or third class to actually have speed loaders. We didn't even have them. But you know what? I think both of you just hit on something so important. I think my personal thing. There's too many options for cops on the street today. And instead of just doing what you need to do to protect yourself, and more people need to realize that cops are allowed to get in fights. They're allowed to protect themselves. But when that whole checklist is in these young cops' heads, that's why they're getting hurt. That's why they're not defending themselves because, oh my God, I'm not to that yet. And Dan, you just said that. Yeah, I'm not there yet. Wait till I get punched in the face, then I can do something. It's asinine what they're putting in these cops' heads. And, you know, they look like, I've seen some of these cops in small town, upstate New York, looking like they're on a SEAL team, you know, with what they're walking around with, you know, and getting out with. And it's way, in my mind, way too much stuff that has to process through your head. Fights are bad enough. Fights happen so quick and decisions have to be made so fast that you don't have time to process stuff. Sometimes it's just reaction and training. And these cops are not doing that, and that's why they're getting hurt.
Yeah, they're very highly tactically dressed nowadays. And, you know, when we're talking about, you know, just the generational things and the training and all, you know, you still have a huge degree of the Ferguson effect at play in a lot of law enforcement agencies. You know, I'm going to answer my calls, and that's it. Nothing proactive, because when you get proactive, that's when you get in trouble. You know, and you know, when they look at all of the history of the things that have happened, I mean, my gosh, we still have an Atlanta cop that is waiting for trial, waiting on trial, where he's being charged with murder because he shot a guy who they were wrestling. The guy took out his taser. The guy grabbed the taser out of the cop's hand. Now they're running. The scumbag turns around, points the taser at the cop, and the cop drills him. That cop is facing murder because of a rogue, crazy-ass liberal DA in Fulton County, Georgia, that's charging him with murder. Now, when he went to work that day and strapped everything on, he said, I'm going to follow my agency policy, the law. He did. Everything he did was by the book. And he's charged with murder. I mean, how do you recruit people, train them, and tell them, don't worry, it's all going to work out right if you do the right thing and you follow the rules?
Far too many examples that we could be on the show for 6 hours easily talking about cases in the past 5 to 10 years of agencies and cities throwing their people under the bus, equipping them with tools that they know are going to cause a problem if they use them in a public sphere. Everything's on camera. But I think It is a great conversation, and I'm telling you, we could do it for hours. But I really do want to make sure we get a chance to talk about the book that you wrote. Fascinating. Murder Without Bodies. Tell us about this. How did this start?
Well, in 2017, when I finished my dissertation, got my doctorate, I absolutely, beyond a doubt, said, I am done researching. I'm done writing. I'm not doing another doggone thing. And then one of my mentors, Dr. Lenny Torito, who mentored me through my doctoral program, he has written, now you want to talk about a guy, he has written 22 textbooks that are in use at 36 different universities and have been translated into 8 different languages. Now, he's not an academician. He's a retired cop. He retired as the chief deputy of Leon County Sheriff's Office, which is Tallahassee. And he actually oversaw the Ted Bundy investigation. So in Tallahassee. So he's that guy. And he's 86 years old and he's still teaching. Incredible guy. But anyhow, he told me, he said, Sully, now you need to write that book. And I said, Doc, it's not going to happen. I'm not writing a book. I love you, but that's not me. I'm done writing and researching. And besides, what am I going to write a book about? Terrorism? I don't even use a textbook when I teach terrorism because every textbook is outdated. If it's published tomorrow about terrorism, it's already outdated, all right? I'm not going to write it on police ethics, undercover operations. They've all been there, done that. And he said, you're going to find something that makes you passionate and you're going to write about it. Yeah, okay, right. So a year ago, I'm teaching my cold case homicide class to traditional college-age kids. It's a Tuesday night class, and it goes for 3 hours. And I had this guy that comes in. He's a homicide detective. He left my agency and went to work for the FBI. That's the way they say it, right? FBI. And he ends up working homicides, federal homicides for the FBI. And so I would have him come in and guest lecture in my cold case homicide class. And he called me because he was supposed to come out on Tuesday. And he called me on Monday and says, hey, Bobby, mind if I bring a prosecutor in with me? This guy's pretty good. And he'll go over a cold case that him and I jointly worked in Tampa. I said, yeah, no problem. And so when this guy gets out of the car, I mean, he's dressed in like this $3,000 Italian suit, kind of a balding guy, little round glasses, super nice guy, very quiet. And I take him into the cafeteria and feed him, and we just talk. I know he's a prosecutor. And then he starts his presentation in front of the kids, and it is a case at the Lakeland Linder Airport in Lakeland where the kid, a 22-year-old kid, the owner of this flight company, it's his son, and he is the assistant manager. He ends up missing, vanished, gone, without a trace, just gone. And then there's a ransom note that comes in to make it look like he was kidnapped. And so the FBI gets involved and everything, and come to find out that they do a ransom exchange, the whole 9 yards. Nobody comes to pick up the ransom, and all communications just fall off. And now, so you got this kid is missing, presumed dead. And so this Cass Castillo fella just unwraps this case. How he found a bad guy. He assumed that the bad guy was the third in charge who had been with Dad's company for 20 years and didn't like the fact that young Junior is coming in. He's going to be the heir apparent to this big flight training academy, and pretty much had him whacked, or whacked it himself. So what it was, without getting too deep into all the details of chapter 1, he builds a case with, and all the cases in the book are about him and him taking on these cases. But I'll get back to that in a minute. I listened to him unpacking this case, and I noticed that all 30 of my students are sitting on the edge of their seats listening. He didn't give them a break for 3 hours. They were amazed. And Dan, Tom, you guys have sat through good police instructors and not so good. This guy was phenomenal. He was saying stuff I've never heard a prosecutor say. Like, just bring me probable cause, I'll do the rest. You know? And somebody's got to take this case. Somebody's got to give a voice to these voiceless people. I'll do it. So anyhow, he goes through all that, and I said, yeah, that was great. And I walk him out to his vehicle. He leaves. And then Bushnell calls me, the FBI agent. He calls me and said, how do you think that went? I said, it's just phenomenal. That guy is incredible. He says, yeah, he is. And you don't know the least of him. And I said, what? And he said, Bobby, he has prosecuted 23 bodyless homicides. 23. No body, no crime scene, no witnesses, no clear motive. And you know his batting averages? I said, what? He said, 1,000. He's never lost. What? I could not sell a bodyless homicide to a prosecutor. Because you know what they would say? No crime, no body. Or no body, no crime. Find me the corpus. Find me the corpus. No body, no crime. So this guy's amazing to me. And come to find out, he had recently retired from being the chief prosecutor in Tampa. And he was immediately scarfed up by, do you know the name Pam Bondi? Yeah, he was scarfed up by Pam Bondi, who was the Attorney General of Florida at the time. And she hired him and put him in the statewide prosecutor's office to go and help any county in the state of Florida with their cold cases to see if they could do anything. And he prosecuted probably half of those cases that I told you about, those 23, while working for her in all different counties. So I'm looking at that and I'm saying, this guy's incredible. And then Lenny Torito's face popped into my mind about one day you're going to find something you're passionate about. And so I told Jeff Bushnell, I said, what do you think? What would he say if I wrote a book about him? He said, I don't know, man. He's kind of really a shy guy and he doesn't like the spotlight. I said, does he have kids? Yeah. Okay. So I crafted this long email to Cass Castillo. And I said, these are my thoughts. I said, I realize you don't like to bring the sunshine upon yourself, but what happens when you're no longer around and somebody says, hey, what did Grandpa Cass do for a living? And you could pull a book off a shelf and say, here, check it out. Or how about this book getting into the hands of young lawyers or young law students that want to be prosecutors? And they're looking at it and they're saying, hey, here's somebody that was willing to take a chance. Here's somebody that was willing to lose a case. Because you guys know, prosecutors a lot of times aren't willing to lose a case. That's why they please so much stuff out. That's why they don't charge. Once the arrest is made, they drop the charges. Cass is not that way. He says, bring it to me. We'll see what we can do. So he agreed to it. And so the book is basically 6 of his most challenging no-body cases. And basically, all of these they start out as a missing person. And missing person cases typically go to the major crimes unit in law enforcement agencies. Major crimes looks at it and says, yeah, missing person. They put out a BOLO. If you come in contact with this person, please let us know. They're listed as missing. And then they kind of forget about it. But then you'll have a detective that is just going through some of these things and say, this just doesn't feel right. There's something about this that doesn't feel right. I think this person's dead. I think they were whacked. But you can't quantify that. That's a gut instinct that detective has. So now that detective has to challenge his or her supervisor to let them chase this thing when there's other homicides where the blood is still dripping that are stacking up. So now you got a sergeant that lets this detective chase this thing. And then the detective is able to creatively make a case. Now you got to find a prosecutor that'll prosecute it. So that's what each one of these chapters is. It takes it all the way up to the prosecutor won't take it, to where then he has to sell it to the statewide prosecutor's office. Cass gets involved, and how they build these cases out of nothing. And yes, they're all circumstantial. Every case in this book is circumstantial evidence, and it's going to take you through the investigation. It's going to take you through the arrest, the pretrial, the trial, and a couple of them even the appeals. And it's just, and you're gonna read it, and there's gonna be a couple chapters where you're gonna say, I'm not sure I would have convicted on this, because it's all circumstantial.
The one part that was interesting, and it lays into a case, is Cass's psychological kind of preview to pick a jury. You have to get in that mindset of convincing not only, like you just said, a sergeant, lieutenant, whatever. Now you have to convince 12 people on the same page with this somewhat of a theory to convict someone. And that's a big part of his strategy, right?
It is, Tom, and theory is right. You have to be able to establish that theory and sell it. And the last chapter of the book is the psychological aspects of jury selection, and he goes through that. It's a psychological mind game, and he came up with a couple of things that I wasn't even really aware of. Was that you still get. I just got out of jury duty. Actually, I just got my first jury summons. There are attorneys that want cops on the jury, and they're not prosecutors. The defense wants the retired cop on that jury because statistically and historically, cops are tougher on the cop and the investigation than a non-cop would be. Like, he took a shortcut there. I would have never done that. I would have never made that assumption. So that's one thing. Cass likes cops, or does not like cops on juries. Defense attorneys do. The other thing is there was just something as simple as the Kimberly Mimovich chapter. She disappeared. She just disappeared without a trace. And of course, it looked like her boyfriend maybe was involved, but she had a prize pit bull that she loved more than anything. And of course, she also had a split personality where she had disappeared before she got this pit bull years before, and she ended up in Fort Lauderdale stripping at a bar under an assumed name just because she was a little wacky upstairs. So this is tough. Everybody's thinking that she just took off again, but they're trying to convince Cass that her boyfriend Dion probably did her in. It gave a couple of reasons why he might want to. And so Cass wasn't going to take this case. He just wasn't seeing it. He wasn't feeling it. And then the detective said, yeah, I can't believe she left her dog. And Cass said, find out everything you can about that dog. So the detectives found who the veterinarian was, found out that this girl she loved this dog so much. The dog, every week, she took it in for a manicure and a pedicure. If the dog's eye was watering, she'd take it in because she was afraid that it had some type of an eye infection. She walked the dog 3 times a week, took him to these dog parks. And Cass said, and she didn't have this dog when she disappeared 4 years ago. No, she's had this dog for 3 years. And he said, she would have never left that dog. I'll take the case. And so what does he do? When he's doing jury selection, he asks the jurors, do you have any animals? Oh, you do? Yeah. What do you have? Well, I have 2 cats. Oh, okay. Do you have any dogs? Oh, no, dogs they're too much work. Okay, thank you very much. Do you like animals? To the next juror, oh yeah, I love animals. I've had dogs my entire life. So you have a really good relationship with your dog? Yeah, I do. Okay, boop, I'll take that one. He packed the jury with dog lovers who could get it that there's no way she's going to leave her dog. And sure enough, the dog was left for 3 days before anybody discovered it. It didn't have any water or anything. So, and then he also does mock trials where they'll hire people, they'll present the evidence to them, and they'll have a mock jury and see what they think of the case. So he puts a whole lot of thought into every one of these cases.
Wow, those cases are not common, but thanks to the work of a man like him, they could become not common, but not out of the question. We had, I will never forget, it was the late 80s, maybe 1990 or so. The first case that I remember, or anybody, there was a lot of talk in New York City. A young girl named Jessica Guzman in the Bronx disappeared. And John Houvain was the case-catching detective, and I worked with John after this. And they went ahead, the Bronx DA's office went ahead with a bodyless prosecution of a livery driver. And the whole detective bureau, we were all watching, everybody watched this. What's going on here? What, is this really going to go through? And they got a conviction. Circumstantial murder cases. Nobody thought it could work. They took a chance. The evidence, there was so many things about it, just like you said, to be considered, but that's a real risk, because if you take a swing and miss and that person walks free, double jeopardy applies. You cannot charge them with that homicide if the body turns up dead in their apartment the next day, right? It's a big risk.
And what happens, Dan, if you convict the person and the dead person reappears 2 years later? That, oh yeah, I just took a sabbatical down to the Bahamas. I'm sorry, did I create a problem? Yeah, so there's just so many issues surrounding these things, so many nuances. And Cass's thing is, he says, hey, somebody's got to be the voice for the voiceless. And it takes somebody who's willing to try and willing to lose.
That's a different level of thinking these days. A lot of people don't think that way anymore. And like you said, how many prosecutors just care about their prosecution rate, could care less about anything else. But the dog thing blows my mind. I mean, that's just a different way of looking at stuff and a different level of thinking of trials. I mean, that's incredible.
Yeah, it's because and you're right, Tom. And people don't realize this that aren't in our business, that these prosecutors, man, that it's like they're baseball players. They take that batting average very seriously. Their win-loss record. And some of them, I know quite a few state attorneys and district attorneys. Some of them have the opinion that if you ain't winning, you ain't going to be working here long.
And you're not going to be ready for your next gig, which they all start looking for as well.
Yeah, so there's just a lot of pressure. And Cass is totally retired now. He's 70 years old, and keep him in your prayers. He's been battling cancer for years. As a matter of fact, he did jury selection on one of these cases. Actually, the House of Horrors, House of Prayer or House of Horrors is what the title is. And it was basically a cult. But while during jury selection, he'd leave at 4:00 and go get a chemo treatment, and then come back and jury select again the next day. I mean, this guy is driven. Remember I told you about cops being on a calling? Cass is called to do this.
That's great. Fantastic. We could speak to you for 12 hours, Bobby. This has been such a pleasure, and I think we'd love to have you back at some point if you're ever open to it. But I can't wait to read Murders Without Bodies. Robert Sullivan, Dr. Robert Sullivan, wrote that book. He's with us today, and we have learned a lot from him about his amazing career. And we talk a little bit about policing and where it's at right now. A great overall discussion. Cannot thank you enough for your time and your career of service. We have so much respect for you and what you're doing. We look forward to hearing more about what you're going to be doing in the future, because we have a feeling you're not done.
Well, I have the utmost respect for you guys and what y'all are doing. And I'm telling you, it was a total honor being with you today. It really was.
Well, thank you, Bob. Where can everyone get the book?
Amazon. Matter of fact, I'm in first place. If you start typing "murders without," boom, I come up.
Awesome.
My Amazon.
That's great.
The Amazon link comes up.
That's awesome. Good for you, man. You deserve it. You know what? When you look back on careers, and we've all done it. We've done it with other guests that we've had on the show. When you look back on your career and you can, get where you're at today, that's a big accomplishment. Because a lot of cops, you do your career, you move on to whatever, and that's kind of the end of it. And you just keep it going and keep giving back. That's the biggest thing you do, Bob, is you're not done. You're not just, okay, I'm retired, that's it. You're teaching, you're kind of hopefully molding the next generation of law enforcement officers out there that are not going to look at it as a job, but look at it as a career like we did. You know, when when all of us got on, there wasn't a thought of leaving. Like, no, you don't leave until your 20 years are up. That's it.
That's
you know,
right.
And that's where we need to get back to get back to law enforcement and where it used to be. And with your help and guidance and experience, we're on our way there. So thank you for all that, Bob.
Well, thank you guys again. I appreciate it.
It's been a pleasure. Bobby Sullivan's book, Murder Without Bodies, available on Amazon under Dr. Robert Sullivan. Exceptional man, exceptional time we had today. Thank you so much. Tom, as always, my partner, why don't you take us out and do what you do.
Well, this is our important segment where we just give thanks to all law enforcement officers out there and pray for them, pray for their families, keep them in your prayers because there's so much that goes into law enforcement that no one knows about. The pressures, the heartache, the stresses, you know, it's not your normal 9-to-5 job, and people need to realize that and keep members of the military, law enforcement officers in their prayers along with their families. Do not forget them. And don't forget us on YouTube, on all our audio channels, on Rumble, Instagram, every place you can think of, we're on, thank God. And thank you for everything everyone's doing out there, keeping this job, this show going and making our job nice and easy. For Bobby Sullivan, for my partner, Dan Murphy, this is Tom Smith for Gold Shields. Everyone out there, stay safe. We'll see everybody soon.